Good afternoon, dear Deputy Minister, dear esteemed speakers, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday, during the first day of the conference, we had the opportunity to discuss about the framework of the European policy towards climate neutrality, as well as the Greek national strategy and plan for 2030 and 2050. We also had the opportunity to listen to the fuels industry representatives, their vision towards energy transition, the proposed pathway, their strategy, and their plans. This is a journey that has already started, and even though it will be a long journey, it requires full speed from today and onwards. Today, in this second day of the conference, we will focus on transport. The transport sector is responsible for the bulk of liquid fuel consumption. And while RED II directive on renewable energy, which was updated in 2018, set an EU target of 14% of renewable energy in transport by 2030, the recently announced sustainable and smart mobility strategy now requires to cut down around 90% of transport emissions by 2050. This will change everything in the sector. There is an urgent need for a broad range of low-carbon solutions covering all sectors of transport, not only urban, but heavy-duty and long-distance road transport too, as well as aviation and marine. Is there only one fit-for-all technological solution to cover all future transport needs and the decarbonization of all transport sectors? Certainly not. Is there only one fit-for-all technological solution able to provide just transition of the transport for all European citizens within the coming years, covering all their needs and providing them access to sustainable and affordable transport solutions and alternatives? The answer is again no. As we discussed yesterday, fuels industry has a proposal on green fuels for achieving climate neutral transports from road to aviation and marine. Green fuels are already on their way through important projects announced around Europe from major industry players. Green fuels projects from biomass and waste, from hydro-treated vegetable oils, reused cooking oil, plastics recycling, synthetic fuels from green hydrogen and recycled CO2. The scene is rapidly changing. There is already renewable diesel for road transport and renewable jet for aviation. They are produced at pilot or even at small industrial scale. Of course, there is a long way to go, but it is a realistic pathway that can offer solutions complementary to other new technologies such as electrification for road transport. The good news regarding green fuels is that they are compatible with existing car engine technology, and they can reduce at once CO2 emissions not only from the new but also from the old cars, with no need to change the car fleet and no need for new infrastructure, supporting thus a just transport transition for EU citizens, providing them alternative technological solutions to choose from for their sustainable transportation. Supporting green fuels for road transport would then create a scale market for their production, sending a strong signal to the investors, while at the same time boosting the production of sustainable aviation and marine fuels. But in order to enable the potential of green fuels in decarbonizing the transport sector, the right policy and legislative framework should be established. For example, the CO2 standards in vehicles must be amended by taking into account the CO2 footprint of fuels. The Fuels Taxation Directive should be revised, taking into account the carbon intensity. Overlapping legislation such as the Renewables Energy Directive and the Fuels Quality Directive should be reformed or simplified. A car using green fuels reduces its CO2 emissions, and in the future, a car that will use 100% renewable fuel, for example, synthetic fuel, will emit net zero CO2, and it should be considered as a zero CO2 emissions car, which unfortunately is not the case under the current EU legislation. Having said that, let us proceed to the second day of the conference to discuss about the challenges of the new technologies in transport, starting from the road transport and then moving to aviation and marine sector during our second session. We have the honor to have with us the Deputy Greek Minister of Infrastructure and Transportation, Mr. Kefalogiannis, to set the scene with his keynote speech. And moving to our first panel on the road transport, we will listen to the proposals of our distinguished guests, representatives of the European Independent Fuel Suppliers, the Hellenic Association of Oil Marketing Companies, and Hydrogen Europe. Executives from two major European companies, REPSOL and OMV, will then present their company strategies, as well as their announced projects on renewable diesel and e-fuels. So it is our pleasure and honor to welcome Ms. Cécile Nourigat from UPEI, Mr. Aligizakis from Hellenic Association of Oil Marketing Companies, Mr. Chatzimarkakis from Hydrogen Europe, Mr. Sastron from REPSOL, and Ms. Atzmannstorfer from OMV. Our second session will focus on aviation and marine. Top executives from the shipping and the aviation sector will present their strategies and their proposals, while major fuel companies will present, among others, their innovative projects for providing renewable fuels. We are pleased and honored to welcome Mr. Farfalios, representing the Union of Greek Ship Owners and the EU Association Intercargo, Mr. Pateras, representing the Hellenic Chamber of Shipping, Mr. Geopolitics from Aegean Airlines, and last but not least, the fuels industry representatives, Mr. Wood from Neste, Mr. Morel from Total. We are excited to have all those distinguished speakers with us, and I would like to thank all of them for their contribution to this debate. And of course, I would like to thank all of you in the audience for your participation in this second day of the conference. And I will now give the floor to Mr. Dimas, who will moderate the first panel, starting with our keynote speaker, the Deputy Minister of Infrastructure and Transport, Mr. Yannis Kefalogiannis.
Welcome to this session. On behalf of our institute of IENE, I would like frankly to welcome all of you for your interest. Today's the session and the topic is the road transport, the challenges of new technologies. A short story. I used to visit almost every summer a very nice hotel by the sea in the part of the Greece. Everything was excellent there. The facilities, the people, the service, the food, the sea. But nearby the hotel, there is a national highway. I remember a lot of discussions about the pollution this highway brings to the whole area. Till a nice guy said the magic word, green fuels. And all of us, we thought, okay, but belongs to the very, very long future. But now, the moment came and the development and the implementation is before us. This is why in IENE we have thought to proceed with the organization of this very interesting conference, and that's why we're going to discuss this issue in this session. Today we have the pleasure to have with us distinguished speakers, excellent speakers coming from the market, associations, organizations. I'm not saying oil companies, I'm saying energy companies, which are dealing every day, every hour with the problems in the ground. But first of all, I would like to welcome, because we have the honor to have with us His Excellency, the Deputy Minister of Greek Minister of Transport and Infrastructure, Mr. Yannis Kefalogiannis, who is going to deliver and to make a presentation to us about the plans of his ministry. I would like to say that the ministry has managed to proceed quickly with the signing of necessary agreements concerning certain new highways in Greece, big projects. And now I think it is, Mr. Kefalogiannis, it is the time for you in your ministry to proceed with the next steps, which is certainly the clean energy in the roads. Thank you for to be with us, and you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dimas. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the invitation and congratulate you on the excellent organization. In spite of the difficult conditions that the pandemic has created for all of us, it is really important to have virtual events like this, as they can contribute very substantially to the public debate. Free movement of people and goods across its internal borders is a fundamental freedom in the single market of the European Union. As the second largest area of expenditure for European households, the transport sector contributes 5% of the European GDP and directly employs around 10 million people. In addition to that, mobility is an enabler of our economic and social life and brings many benefits for its users. However, the cost of this mobility includes, among others, environmental degradation, greenhouse emissions, and the climate change. Given the high proportion of the total EU greenhouse gas emissions, the EU has set an ambitious target to reduce at least by 55% the greenhouse gas emissions until 2030 and to achieve climate neutrality by 2050 by introducing more ambitious policies to reduce transport's reliance on fossil fuels and its synergy with the zero pollution efforts. In this framework, the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy, which has been recently adopted by the Commission in the light of the European Green Deal, has set three pillars of actions. First, make all transport modes more suitable. Second, make sustainable alternatives widely available in a multimodal transport system. And third, put in place the right initiatives and incentives to drive the transition. When it comes to alternative fuels and the new technologies of liquid fuels, the green ones, there is no doubt that they can also contribute gradually to improve the air quality and support the decarbonization of the transport sector, since the achievement of the climate goals needs the synergy of multiple actions and measures. Sustainable, renewable, and low carbon fuels must be deployed on a large scale without delay. Green fuels can and should be used not only in the road transport, but also in the aviation and maritime sectors. The challenge is huge, but especially for the aviation sector, severely hit by the pandemic, it is vital in order to recover and survive to develop sustainable aviation fuels. So, where do we stand in Greece in this respect? The Greek government has set a very ambitious program and has made the green transition one of its top priorities. Following the adoption of the National Energy and Climate Plan, which has set a roadmap for achieving specific targets by the end of 2030 and underlines the priorities of our country for the energy sector and for the climate change for the next decade, the Ministry of Infrastructure and Transport, in collaboration with the Ministry of the Environment and Energy, adopted the first law for the promotion of electromobility. In addition to that, our ministry, having the responsibility of the national strategy for deployment of the market of the alternative fuels infrastructure, is now working on its upgrade, especially concerning the electric recharging infrastructure for passenger cars and vans. Our plan set ambitious specific goals, and more precisely, by 2030, 1 out of 3 new vehicles has to be electric. At least 19% of the total energy used in the transport sector should derive from renewable sources. From this 19%, around 8% will derive from advanced biofuels. It is also recognizing that low-carbon liquid fuels, as they come on the market, will enable to progressively decarbonize the entire car fleet, existing and new vehicles. Alternative technologies, such as battery electric vehicles or hydrogen fuel cells, will require, instead of a progressive replacement of the car fleet. Therefore, low-carbon liquid fuels will, for the foreseeable future, provide a competitive solution compared to alternative technologies and reduce pressure and cost of achieving complete fleet turnover to ensure climate neutrality. Moreover, Greece works closely with the European Commission and other member states in several European projects. The fuel price comparison project, where the Greek ministry is acting as a coordinator, is a promotional campaign to compare the price of fuels to encourage citizens to switch to alternative fuel vehicles. This project is of utmost importance since the adequate consumers' awareness in order to end the current lack of transparency on pricing is among the key issues to tackle. In addition to that, the project data collection relating to recharging refueling points for alternative fuels and the unique identification codes related to e-mobility actors is a support action aiming in a uniform coding of recharging infrastructure, its position and the dynamic data in all member states of the EU. Closing out my intervention, I would like to underline three main points which, to my personal point of view, are crucial. First, nobody can deny that climate change and environmental degradation are an existential threat to European and to the world. And to overcome these challenges, Europe needs a new growth strategy that will transform the Union into a modern, resource-efficient and competitive economy where there are no set net emissions of greenhouse gases by 2050. Economic growth is decoupled from resource use. No person and no place is left behind. Therefore, the European Green Deal is our plan to make the EU's economy more sustainable. We can do this by turning climate and environmental challenges into opportunities and making the transition just and inclusive for all. Greece supports and prioritizes this effort. Second, in order to achieve all these ambitious goals, it is absolutely necessary to lay out all required important measures of legislation, tax, investment initiatives and incentives, and at the same time mobilize as much public and private funding as we can. Our primary goal should to achieve the transition to climate neutrality in a fair and just way for all. Third, public awareness is extremely important in this field of climate change, renewable sources, green fuels, etc., which many times is confusing and incomprehensible for lots of people. Nothing can be achieved without the people's help and contribution, especially in this so important goal, not only for transport, but for mankind itself. Thank you all for your attention.
Now let's move to the next speaker. The next speaker is Mrs. Cécile Nourigat, Secretary General at UPEI, the voice of Europe's independent fuel suppliers. I have to say that I consider this voice extremely important because it comes from the ground where the problem is located and questions arising and answers coming up for our topic. Mrs. Nourigat, the floor is yours. We can hear your presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here virtually with you. My name is Cécile Nourigat. As it was mentioned, I am Secretary General for the European Association representing independent fuel suppliers. I am based in Brussels, and I would like to share the views of our sector on this important topic of green liquid fuels, especially for the transport sector. It's a very important topic, obviously, and we talk much about it in Brussels, but I think it's also important to have this debate at a national level. So it's really a pleasure for me to be here and to contribute to this session today. So first, I would like to share a few words about our association, who we are, because it will help you understand why we have such a vision. Then I'll tell you a little bit about our vision and how to address the challenges for green liquid fuel deployment in the transport sector. So first of all, about our association. So UPEI represents nearly 2,000 European importers and wholesale and retail distributors of energies. We are both active in the transport and the heating sector. We have currently 24 members in 20 countries across Europe, unfortunately not yet from Greece, but hopefully very soon. And I mentioned energies because our members are involved in all parts of the business. These are the business areas in which our members are involved. So you can see here on the graph that they import fuels, they store them at terminals, but also at secondary storage. And then they have an infrastructure made of trucks, barges, or trains to distribute those fuel where they are needed. And they supply fuels to industries, agriculture facilities, to maritime and aviation as well, to heating, to the domestic sector. But the biggest chunk of these fuels go to the road transport sector. Our members have a network of retail stations across Europe. Around 20% of the total number of retail stations across Europe belong to independent companies. And our members are active in conventional fuels, obviously, but they are also active and increasingly in alternative fuels. Because they are not producers of energy, they are quite neutral when it comes to the type of energy to be distributed. And they are currently involved in gaseous fuel, hydrogen, electricity, and sustainable biofuels as well. In total, UPEI members represent 30% of the fuel demand in Europe. Storage capacity, distribution capacity, as I mentioned before, and over 21,000 retail stations across Europe. And altogether, they employ 84,000 people directly in Europe. So what really brings our members together is the independence, so they are not connected directly to energy producers or oil companies. And typically our members are smaller, so medium and small companies, typically family-owned companies active in the fuel sector. And my work in Brussels as a typical Brussels-based European association is to represent the sector towards European institutions, to inform our members on legislative development and policy development of interest, and to advocate on behalf of the membership for a favorable legislative framework. Now, I would like to explain a little bit what is our vision towards 2050. So, I mean, the context obviously is following the agreement reached in Paris for a global mitigation of climate change, is to drop carbon emission across the sectors. But this drop has to be sustainable as well in the long term. So what we have done as an association is we have published our vision 2050, which includes short and long-term recommendation for a climate neutral society. And this vision was published in 2019 as a reaction of the publication from the European Commission called A Clean Planet for All. That is the long-term vision of the Commission And that was the first time that the climate neutrality objective was really set in stone. So to do so, we have started to outline the challenges. It is very clear that electrification of the transport fleet has a great potential, but looking at the current rate of introduction of battery electric vehicles, and even looking at the projected rate of battery electric vehicles in the future, it is very clear that it is not reduction in light of the depleting carbon budget that we have. And another problem is the aging vehicle fleet. So the stock is older and older, and this is not going to improve at the aftermath of the COVID pandemic. So we have a fleet that requires to be cleaned up, and we will have, in spite of a quick introduction of battery electric vehicle, we will still have conventional vehicles on the market for a long time. So there is definitely no single solution to decarbonize the road transport sector. Then we have different challenges which require dedicated response. Typically, we have some segments of the transport sector, well, aviation and maritime, but I would argue not only aviation and maritime, but also heavy-duty road transport, long-haul road transport, segments which are difficult to electrify or not effective to electrify. And I would like to insist a little bit on the not effective, because it's not because it's possible that it's necessarily a good use of our resources. So for these segments, we need a response. Plus, looking at the supply side, we see renewable electricity production growing. And because all that electricity cannot be used at the same time, it's important also to have a solution to store energy in the long term. And in the end, the key element of our vision is it's not a choice between electricity and fuels, because it's clear that both will be needed, but it's a move from high carbon to low carbon and from fossil to renewable, whatever the fuel. And actually research has shown that combination of various technologies can maximize cuts at a lower cost and the best use of our resources. And actually the EU long-term vision, so the one outlined in the Clean Planet for All, actually recognize that decarbonization of mobility cannot be based on silver bullets. So this is what we have proposed in our vision. First of all, in the short term, so looking at 2030, there are a number of existing technology that can reduce emission immediately, together with an improvement of energy efficiency. It is clear that energy has a key role to play, but we also believe that the increased use of sustainable biofuels, for example, blended into conventional fuel, can bring benefits immediately, and they can be deployed at higher blends, and also in application where they are not currently used. For example, non-road mobile machineries, or maritime transport, and this can bring immediate benefits. And also the increased deployment of other alternative fuels, depending on their suitability for each application. Gaseous fuel, hydrogen, electricity, of course, can bring immediate benefit today. So this is our recommendation for the short term. Now, looking at the long term, looking at 2050, we promote the development of carbon neutral fuels to suit all needs and applications. And these carbon neutral fuels have already been well defined, typically in the Renewable Energy Directive that was adopted a few years back at European level. So these are advanced biofuel and biogases, so produced from biogenic feedstocks, e-fuels, or also called power to X, and recycled carbon fuels. And we believe that in the longer term, this will have a great potential alongside green electricity and hydrogen to reach net zero carbon. And why is it so important to have these fuels? Because they have significant benefits that cannot be found anywhere else. Typically, they have a significant energy content per mass, which is very important for these applications requiring high amount of energies. They can be stored pre-use in liquid or gaseous forms, and they can be stored in the long term without any energy losses. So they are portable as well. So they can be produced maybe in other parts of the world and then be transported to Europe, or at European scale, they can be produced in one country and moved to others and be used where they are needed. And they allow the optimization of the existing distribution infrastructure. And this is very important because they can be used and supplied, repurposing the existing infrastructure, therefore making the most of the assets that we currently have in Europe. Terminal storage, distribution, and retail stations. And they offer also great benefits when it comes to energy security and reliability because of their storability and their portability, of course. And as an association representing independent fuel suppliers, we have endorsed the 2050 climate neutrality targets. We have endorsed it fully. And although the members of UPEI are not fuel producer, they believe they have a key role to play because they can channel the energy transition and they can bring those low carbon and carbon neutral solutions to consumers to keep the energy system and the mobility system in operation. And this is how they propose to play that role in the future of the energy sector. First of all, by repurposing and investing in the distribution infrastructure, which they have already, and that can be reused or upgraded to accommodate the upcoming technologies, new fuels. They have an extensive expertise with the handling of fuels, all types of fuels, and they can also make this expertise available for handling new and emerging technologies. And very importantly, as it was emphasized by Mr. Dimas, they make also the link with the consumer. They are on the ground. They have a direct contact with consumers, and they can help communicate the energy transition to consumers and make sure that these solutions that will allow to reach carbon neutrality are embraced and fully deployed by end users. And they can also contribute by leaving no one behind. Typically, the members of UPEI are active in rural and mountainous areas, for example, areas that are not connected necessarily to grids. So they can also bring the transitions to these users that are maybe in less connected areas of Europe. So this is our vision for 2030 and 2050. Now, before closing on my presentation, I just would like to share a few recommendations. The title of this session is The Challenges of New Technologies. Therefore, I would like to take the opportunity today to share some recommendations on how to address these challenges. So it won't be easy, but there are definitely ways also to improve the current policy and regulatory framework in order to ease the way towards the deployment of low carbon and renewable fuels. First of all, what we are missing today at European level is a dedicated strategy for green liquid fuels. We have a strategy for hydrogen, we have a strategy for batteries, but we're missing this bit about green liquid fuels, and it would be welcome to have an all-encompassing strategy that also look at the supply chain. What is very important as well is to have an equal recognition of all technologies based on their greenhouse gas performance and their sustainability over the life cycle. And it's very important because too often we hear that there is an opposition between electrification, a battery electric vehicle, for example, which is understood as being clean, and an internal combustion engine, which is understood as being fossil, whereas green liquid fuels can also bring the two together and make the internal combustion engine a sustainable option. So this is also very important. We need a more consistent regulatory framework. All the pieces of legislation need to work well together. We need a stable policy framework in order to really push investment forward. In the area of sustainable biofuels, we have seen that policy uncertainty, as in the past 10, 15 years, really hampered the investment in the solution. And we need to prioritize volume, not to limit any volume. This is why we should not look only at aviation and maritime for green liquid fuels, but we should also look at road transport, because this will create a mass market that makes investment worth it and allowing us to get economies of scale. And we need to recognize the efficiency in repurposing the existing infrastructure, as I mentioned before. We need to support innovation, and at last but not least, we need to make sure that we involve the end users, so the consumers, because ultimately they will make the decision about which option is more suitable to their needs. And it is really them that will drive the market forward. So the energy transition and reaching climate neutrality cannot happen without involving end users. So this is what I wanted to share today. Any question that you may have?
Okay, we thank you very much, Cécile, for your very comprehensive, detailed, and a very informative presentation. It's going to be very useful for all of us. And before passing the floor to the next speaker, I would like to make a question to you. Cécile, can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, okay. I noticed in one of your slides that you said that this is not a choice between electricity and fuels. Both will be needed. And I would like to ask you, do you think that EU authorities share the same view? Because I have seen that they have stopped the support of the investments concerning the gas, not oil infrastructure, but also gas infrastructure. And I would like to share this view with you. What do you say?
Well, I think it is recognized by European policymakers when looking at the bigger picture. So when looking at all sectors of the economy, I think it is clear that certain transport sectors, such as aviation and maritime, or certain sector of the economy more generally, such as industry, need liquid fuels. And I think this is very clear. What is less clear is to what extent liquid fuels have a role to play also in the road transport of the future. And this is something that I mentioned in my presentation. I think at this point we need volume, and we need also to have different options and not to bet everything on what option. So in that context, we are at least advocating for this broader approach to road transport, and I think there is a key role to play also for gaseous fuels. There is the directive at a European level that is going to be revised about alternative fuels infrastructure, and gaseous infrastructure is a key part of that. And to our knowledge, it is not going to be discontinued. Now, I think it's important not only to have all the options included in this directive, but also to give them a fair chance. And to give them a fair chance, I think it's important to review certain pieces of legislation Mrs. Gutta mentioned at the beginning the CO2 regulation from vehicle. I think this is a key one because currently it doesn't allow for an equal treatment of all technology solutions. So as UPEI, we believe that all solutions, including gas, have a contribution to make, and we are working towards towards the European Commission and advocating for having a policy framework that really match this ambition.
Okay, we thank you very much. Certainly, at the end of the session, we are going to discuss a little bit more about that altogether. Now it's time to go to the next speaker. The next speaker is Mr. John Aligizakis. Mr. John Aligizakis is the chairman of Hellenic Petroleum Marketing Companies Association and is CEO of the company ELINOIL. Unfortunately, for reasons beyond his will, we don't have Mr. Aligizakis with us, but we have a video with his presentation, which is going to see and to listen and follow this presentation.
Ladies and gentlemen, the years to come, heading towards 2050, decarbonization is going to have a significant impact and is already affecting the oil distribution chain from the refineries to the final consumer, not to mention petrol stations. Today, we are talking about energy products and not fuels or petroleum products. Products that we once considered as alternative or renewable are coming into our daily routine, substituting conventional ones. Some of them without causing major disruptions in the supply chain and infrastructure, others requiring significant investment and changes. New generation biofuels, compressed and liquefied natural gas, electricity for vehicles are already available from our companies. Others are to come in the near future, such as products as methanol, ammonia, hydrogen, and fuel cells. Products that we could not even imagine a few years ago. The market is diversifying significantly, and the new conditions bring companies to the edge of major changes. It is obvious that for these changes, we must take brave decisions concerning large investment in infrastructure, know-how, and staff. Nevertheless, I strongly believe that liquid fuels, as we knew them until now, the conventional ones, will continue to play an impact role after 2030. Most probably, even after 2050. On the way to decarbonization, thermal engines may tend to be phased out, especially in small vehicles. Nevertheless, conventional technology seems that it will be widely used for the next 20 or 30 years in light and heavy-duty vehicles, shipping, and aviation. In this way, a large part of the supply chain will continue to exist as it is. After all, many of the new modified fuels will be produced by exactly the same infrastructure, such as the second generation advanced liquid biofuels or methanol. On the other hand, some members of Hellenic Petroleum Marketing Companies Association, SEEPE, are already investing in new forms of fuels, which, although not widely spread, are highly promoted by the European Union. In light of all the future changes, a small number of companies of our association are already setting up refueling stations with compressed or liquefied natural gas and installing superchargers. Large investments in comparison with a low return for the time being. And all the above, in addition to the economic crisis, which brought to our sector a loss of 40% of its sales. Probably the most important problem that industry will face in the near future is electromobility, which is rapidly advancing in small private vehicles. E-mobility has significant advantages, and that is why it is so strongly promoted by the global community and the Greek government, of course. Unfortunately, e-mobility is expected to create serious problems for all the petroleum companies. Of course, we have our network of gas stations, and that can be used as charging station, but it's not an ideal solution, especially if we consider the current status of the most Greek gas stations. In addition, the chargers that will be installed at the gas stations must be superchargers, which will require very high investments which cannot be soon depreciated. It is therefore obvious that our sector will suffer major upheavals and will require significant decisions to take in the coming years. All companies will have to invest a great deal in research and development, in infrastructure and know-how, in understanding and anticipating the future. In other words, we must not be afraid of the evolution. If we do not act so, probably there'll be no future for us, or it becomes very difficult. Nevertheless, one way or another, the world will still need energy. And this energy must be transferred from its production spot to the final consumers. This is exactly the job that we are doing for more than a century now, and I'm quite sure that we'll continue to do so successfully in the future. The planet is facing the enormous problem of climate change and its consequences on the environment. Unfortunately, every single day we watch problems arising from the significant changes on the planet. We cannot overlook the fact that energy plays the most important role in this. And petroleum companies all over the world are willing to adapt and participate in the energy world of the future. In Greece, the members of our association share the same point of view. However, in order to be able to cope with our new role, we'll definitely need the assistance of the European Union and the state. Greek petroleum market must eliminate the serious problems such as smuggling, pumping, counterfeiting, and of course, unfair competition coming from the past, but unfortunately, still present nowadays. Problems that probably due to COVID-19 have been left behind for the last year by the government, but believe me, create a very unfair environment to operate. In addition, the state should reduce bureaucracy and over-taxation. This is a huge problem that affects the liquidity of our companies, as maybe is one of the main reasons that a number of small companies couldn't stay in the market. The role for the members of our association is crucial, as shown by the European directives, since all obligations towards the community are now mainly obligations of petroleum companies, namely energy savings, sustainability, greenhouse gas emission reduction, tax collection. So the Greek state should therefore assist companies in upgrading their role, allocating all reserves to minimize market distortion. The state should also subsidize and promote petroleum companies for their actions in energy saving obligation scheme, sustainability, and greenhouse emissions reduction. Finally, it must eliminate its bureaucratic barriers and entanglements in order to enable the market transition to the new framework from conventional fuels to the new energy landscapes smoothly. Ladies and gentlemen, the energy future is already here. And the members of our association not only participates with prudence, boldness, and investments, but offers as well its know-how and cooperation in shaping, along with the state, the new energy market. Thank you very much.
Okay, we thank Mr. Aligizakis for his presentation. And now we have to move to our next speaker. Next speaker is Mr. Chatzimarkakis, Secretary General Hydrogen Europe. I'm very interested to hear what the Hydrogen Europe says about all these issues, and I'm going to follow thoroughly Mr. Chatzimarkakis. Mr. Chatzimarkakis, you have the floor.
Thanks very much first of all, for the invitation, and secondly, for giving us the opportunity to present Hydrogen Europe. This is basically the membership of Hydrogen Europe. It's an association that deals with everything around hydrogen, not only fuel cells, but also hydrogen as the basis of e-fuels. You can see here that also a lot of companies from Greece have recently joined us, including companies that are here in the program, like Hellenic, Petroleum, and Moderator, and others. So this is quite good. Next slide, please. Hydrogen Europe is a fully fledged association. So on one hand, we are doing policy, but I'm not focusing on that at the moment. I'm focusing on the innovation part that you see here in the middle. We are, so to say, the leaders of a consortium which is called FCHJU, Fuel Cell Hydrogen Joint Undertaking. You can see that there in the middle. It's a joint partnership, a public-private partnership between the European Commission, research and industry, and it's industry-led. So Hydrogen Europe is leading that part. And although I will talk to you about policy in the next slides, I want to focus on this because we managed via this partnership to bring into some cities, into some ports, hydrogen applications, especially with buses, but also with taxis, so passenger cars and other applications. We have a dedicated focus on mobility there, on transport, but not only. This year, I mean, would we have met 1 year before? We would have said hydrogen is still science fiction. But this has changed dramatically over the last year, also co-indicated by the pandemic, because the Green Deal needed to have an acceleration. So we collaborated very, very closely with the European Commission and also the member states. And what we got 8th of July was the hydrogen strategy, also the presentation of the energy system integration, which is basically the next gas package. But in fact, it will be not only gas, it will be the combination of renewable electricity in power grids and gas, and how you combine it with hydrogen. So power to gas is basically power to hydrogen, and that will be the basis, the legislative basis of this approach. And also we got the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance, which was launched and initiated. Hydrogen Europe has the role of a coordinator in that initiative, and I'll come back to this later on. Now, hydrogen has reached the highest level. Not only Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans is very committed, and this is very important to have, so to say, Mr. Green Deal to be committed about that technology. He continuously has said that hydrogen rocks, and he's committed to make it a success. It's easier for him as a Dutchman because the Netherlands are definitely, when it comes to technology and to application, one of the world-leading countries. But also Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission President, has not discovered. She has supported really wholeheartedly the technology, and she has addressed the Hydrogen Council, our partner on the global level, recently, and has elaborated on her strategy. Now, hydrogen and road transport, and transport in general, is a long-lasting story. Fuel cells and batteries, we have heard that already in a previous presentation, can be regarded as complementary, but we need to be careful. So what is complementary? And what you see here is that the longer the range is and the more weight you have, the less battery is a good option. So we also would advocate batteries up to 40 kilowatt hours in urban applications, but that's it. We know the superiority of the fuel cell technology, and that is why we believe that we should understand some ideological sensitivities. Happy to discuss that. And that's why we definitely know that everything which is a van, medium, large car, and of course, heavy duty trucks, buses, coaches, and notwithstanding, of course, airplanes and ships should be hydrogen driven. This has been accepted also by DG Move. That's the transport and mobility part of the European Commission. We have signed together with the Commissioner Adina Valean a coalition statement 23rd of November of last year, where the OEMs, fuel cell and hydrogen technology suppliers, but also refueling and hydrogen infrastructure providers, truck operators, users of road freight services and related industry associations joined forces to announce that they foresee that up to 100,000 hydrogen-powered trucks and 1,500 stations will be deployed by 2030. That's, so to say, one of the first outcome of the European hydrogen strategy, and it is doable to have 100,000 hydrogen-powered trucks, but it needs, of course, an effort, and we are definitely going into that direction. And we can build on the hydrogen strategies. We can see that many countries have already adopted their hydrogen strategies. You can see them on the left-hand side in turquoise, and some others, including Greece, are planning a hydrogen strategy, the ones in yellow. And if you see how much of money is earmarked for the different hydrogen strategies, it's quite impressive. If you put this all together, what Germany, Spain, France, Portugal, look at Portugal, 7 to 9 billion alone Portugal, Austria and Italy have put into the basket, it's 46 billion. 46 billion earmarked money for hydrogen strategies in the next 10 years or 9 years. So until 2030, this is remarkable. If you break this down to the mobility targets, so all the strategies mentioned some mobility targets, you can see here some highlights. I'm not going through all these figures, but what we can see is, let's take, for instance, the Netherlands, and it's quite ambitious what the Netherlands want to do. They want to have fuel cell cars, fuel cell vehicles, 15,000 up to already in 2025. So 15,000 the next 4.5 years, 300,000 already in 2030. And then heavy duty vehicles, 3,025, and hydrogen refueling stations, 50. For the Netherlands, that is already something. Germany has already 110 fueling stations. I myself, driving a hydrogen car, a Nexo, I enjoy, of course, to travel in Germany in normal times quite easily. Where I'm now in Brussels, we have 2 hydrogen refueling stations in Belgium. And you definitely can see this is what needs to be part of these strategies. I've heard in a previous discussion that in Greece, there will be soon a first hydrogen fueling station. That's of course important. And if you see, there are also regional strategies in some countries, like in Greece, where we have with Western Macedonia a region that is very importantly engaged into hydrogen and might become also a hub, a European hub for hydrogen technologies. So this should just give you a highlight of where we are. What is the question about fuel cells? Here you see a motor. Let me say a motor. Basically, it's a stack. It's around a fuel cell. What you see is very, very similar to a combustion engine, but it is the fuel cell that is hidden behind all these components that are needed to basically cool down, to convert, also to exhaust. But this seems like being interesting out of a job perspective. If we would go for batteries, we would have 200 to 250 components per engine. If you go for Fuel cell, you have 1,300 components, combustion is 1,400. So what you see is already that there is a considerable amount of value that is created if you go for a fuel cell-based economy. Where do we have these centers in Europe? They are in, well, you might say the usual suspects, but this is quite interesting that the fuel cell business is strong, of course, in Canada, all over the globe, in Korea, in Japan, and it starts to be strong in Europe. I don't exclude that some components also will be manufactured in Greece, in Western Macedonia, where we have concrete plans to bring a bus production into the country. What about existing fleets? Also, this was a debate that you had before. Most of the pieces of legislation that are in place or under review are for new vehicles, but what to do with existing fleets? Here we have given out a position paper where we describe what hydrogen could do. I stay with the arrows down there saying the use of synthetic fuels, so hydrogen-made fuels or derivatives from hydrogen can help to bring down CO2 emissions in road transport. Basically, you change the software. You keep the hardware, you keep the combustion car, and you change the software. And you can do this also with maritime and aviation. And here, with economy of scale, we will get also the cost decrease. You have seen that the commissioner, Adina Valian, is Romanian. And indeed, she has the justified question, what about Romania? We cannot afford all Romanians a new electric or electric car driven with a battery or with a fuel cell. And it's absolutely right. So what we need is to encompass, to entail into the strategies also the synthetic fuel aspect in order to have an affordability of the circular economy. That's the role of Power to X. So Power to X, making fuels, synthetic fuels or electric fuels liquid fuels out of renewable energy. And this here is a chart from our member Siemens Energy. Is possible. You can do, of course, any kind of fuel out of it. This week, Shell has announced that they have produced a big amount of e-kerosene in order to fuel a flight from Amsterdam to Paris with KLM Air France. And basically, this is crystal clear what will happen there in the Netherlands. They will start to produce e-kerosene in big volumes. They have pipelines from Rotterdam, port of Rotterdam, to Amsterdam Airport, to Frankfurt Airport, and to Düsseldorf Airport, direct pipelines. So you can decarbonize the flights flying from Frankfurt, Düsseldorf, Amsterdam directly by using these pipelines. So it's a quick win. You might say that you have an efficiency loss, but we say more and more that it's not about the single technology efficiency. It's about the system and the cost efficiency. And if you can produce renewable energy very, very cheaply, but have a hard time to bring it into the power grid, this is something that affects especially countries that have already a high range of renewable energy, then this is a very cost-effective way of using the renewable energy and bringing it, so to say, in the old hardware that can use it. So the European Commission has launched the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy via a communication. Basically, what the Commission announces is we need to reach 90% reduction of CO2 emissions, of greenhouse gas emissions in transport by 2050. And they say that we overall must shift the existing paradigm of incremental change to fundamental transformation. Thus, this strategy sets out a roadmap for putting European transport firmly on the right track for a sustainable and smart future. And there are certain sustainability targets that I'm not going all through them, but they need to be reached. And we believe that hydrogen in many, many forms can help and can contribute to that. We have heard about ammonia being a fuel or being in a position to be used as a fuel also especially in maritime, both in fuel cells where ammonia is cracked, nitrogen goes to the air, and the hydrogen that stays will be used in the normal process to be transformed into electricity and water, steam, and heat. But also in combustion. Two-stroke maritime engine can work with ammonia as a combustion fuel. Hydrogen Europe has commented on the sustainable and smart mobility strategy. And if you agree or if you are interested, please have a look. It's easy to find it via the internet, Googling it. And we have made some highlights there. I just talked about the maritime perspective that was in the other panel, so I'm not touching upon that here, but we have a strong and good roadmap, and especially for Greece, this roadmap is definitely a good basis to become global leader. Greece as a global leader in greening the shipping, the maritime sector, as we have considerable companies from Greece as members, we are elaborating that with them together. And we are very, very happy that here there's a perspective of Greece becoming really global leader, global champion.
Mr. Chatzimarkakis, we need to speed up a little bit.
I will speed up. We have also a nice project on road transport. I'm not going into the detail. Now it's not, yeah. Just let me elaborate on the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance as a tool to do all this. This has been kicked off, as I said, 8th of July. So basically what we have here is more than 1,000 members, many of them from Greece, that in 6 round tables try to make a project pipeline at the different parts of the value chain. One of them is mobility. And the others are, of course, the production of hydrogen, the distribution of hydrogen through our pipelines and other transport modes, and the use then in mobility, in the energy sector, in industry, and so on and so forth. We need to deliver and will deliver in May this project pipeline, and this will be also encompass some political regulatory ideas. Thank you for your attention. You see, hydrogen is a good and interesting and cost-effective option. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chatzimarkakis, for a very interesting, paper presentation. I would like to make a question for you before giving the floor to the next speaker. Tell me, are you satisfied with the existing framework within European Union? Or you think that other steps have to be done to accelerate the whole issue?
I will only give you 2 examples because the framework is, of course, too complex. One example is the alternative...
With few words.
Yeah. The Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Directive. That's one framework, AFID. In this directive, charging points for batteries are obligatory. So member states need to show where they put charging points. Hydrogen was up to now on a voluntary basis. Of course, we want this also to be obligatory. Example number 1. Example number 2, Renewable Energy Directive. You have multipliers there where renewable energy can be used and will be multiplied for battery cars. You don't have the same multiplier for fuel cell. And that is something that needs to be levelized, that needs to be brought into the same, on the same level. And then definitely it's also better for somebody to invest into hydrogen. So we are working on that also. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Let's move to the next speaker, Mr. Oscar Sastron. Since I'm coming from an oil company, I feel very well. All the people come from oil companies like REPSOL and OMV. So I'm looking forward to hear the presentation from Oscar and to see what's going on with REPSOL, which is a very famous and very good, not oil company anymore, but energy company. Oscar, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. As you may know, REPSOL used to be an oil and gas company. Now it's an integrated energy company. We operate in 34 countries, and we also have 700,000 customers of electricity, and we also have low emission electricity generation. So as Mr. Dimas says, we are not only an oil and gas company. Our ambition is to become net zero emissions company by 2050, and we were the first company in the sector to set this ambitious goal. So the first step to achieve this is through our 2021-2025 strategic plan, an ambitious roadmap that will enable us to progress successfully toward our multi-energy commitment in an effort to cover all of society's energy and mobility needs. In 2021, we already plan to reduce our carbon intensity indicator by 3% compared to the 2016 benchmark. To further reduce the emissions associated to our current portfolio of liquid fuels, we have three pillars. We're talking about supply chain. Talking about supply chain, we must use waste and residues as raw feedstock in our production. They are very different from crude oil. Many of them need a special pretreatment and special processes prior to the entry to our refining sites. Also, a new supply chain must be developed to introduce a broader group of materials. Talking about technology, even if many of our industrial sites have a lot of flexibility, some new process must be developed. We are talking about hydrotreatment, as you see here. We are talking about pyrolysis, fermentation, gasification, and many more. And there is a third very important key, is several key technologies could potentially be deployed across Europe to deliver these low carbon liquid fuels as a solution, but we need and support and a clear and stable framework that support the need to significant investment. If we look at the evolution of the low carbon fuels production in our company, REPSOL began working on this transformation several years ago, what we call the past, with the production of sustainable conventional biofuels and energy efficiency, and digitization also, because it's and will be the main driver to support our business. But nowadays, REPSOL has new lines of work to transform our production sites and products and to achieve carbon neutrality target by 2050. That is the future, which are the advanced biofuels, along with green hydrogen and also with e-fuels. This transformation will materialize in several ways. Today, we're working hard to bring to the market the most competitive advanced biofuels, but simultaneously, we are developing now new projects to include the production and use of green hydrogen in our refineries and also in our products, together with other initiatives that I will share with you later in the presentation. For example, in Puerto Llano, we already succeed to produce aviation fuels made from vegetable origin. We made the first batch, and we were pioneering the company and manufacturing of this sustainable aviation biofuel stream. 7,000 of the new fuel were produced and will be followed by other trials in different refineries of the group. Talking about producing biofuels from waste and residues, we are already working in new projects. In this example, we can see the construction of the first HVO advanced biofuel plant in Spain, in our refinery in Cartagena, in the south of Spain. The plant will have an annual production capacity of 250,000 tons of HVO, biojet, bionaphtha, and biopropane. It's a very modular production. The plant is projected to be operational in 2023. It will produce advanced biofuels from recycled raw materials, and these new advanced biofuels will make it possible to cut CO2 emissions by an staggering amount of 900,000 tons per year. This pioneering facility will be equipped with cutting-edge technology and the most efficient solutions. And in line with our commitment to become a net zero emission company, with this investment, we are reinforcing the role as a significant actor in the energy field. With this state-of-the-art project, we are making a commitment to develop the industrial sector also and generate economic activity in Spain while promoting direct, indirect, and induced employment. Because with the auxiliary companies that we are working on the construction side and the commission work of the plant, we are to induce more than 1,000 professionals in the task. This plant is a very good example for the today, but what could happen in the near future? We can see that new technologies are needed, but these new technologies may be different from the current ones. And we need to be mature. They need to be mature, and CapEx and OpEx must be reduced in the future. We see that also that we will need renewable electricity. Renewable electricity in the form of power purchase agreement could also contribute to reduce our CO2 footprint. CO2 capture technology, it will be always used when needed. And in the long term, we also will have renewable hydrogen as a mainstream utility. If we move forward and watch the future, what we will see? Here we have another example. Our company recently announced the launch of a major pioneering decarbonization industrial demo plant in the Petroleum refinery in the north of Spain. This project involves the construction of one of the largest plants in the world for producing net zero emissions fuels from CO2 and renewable hydrogen generated with renewable energy. Also in the project is involved the Energy Agency of the Basque government, a public agency. This project is be launched with relevant European player also, and we are going to develop new technologies to reduce emissions much more. These facilities will be located in Bilbao, in the Petroleum refinery. And why the Petroleum refinery? Because Petroleum refinery is one of the few refineries, the only one in Spain that has integrated the process to capture, to storage, and to use CO2. And this is why we use CO2 from the refinery, hydrogen, green hydrogen from electrolysis, and we mix together and we produce a synthetic fuel in this plant. But if we see this project and we go a bit further, in the same refinery, we have a second project. We will develop and will generate gas from urban waste. This gas will replace part of the traditional fuels we use in petroleum production process, both for energy purposes and also for the production of renewable hydrogen. Our vision is very ambitious, but we think it's achievable. It's based both on established and emerging technologies and on models of industrial collaborations built on the principles of circular economy and resource efficiency. However, we will require an enabling policy framework. Talking about regulatory issues, as the global demand for competitive liquid fuels is expected to increase, these low carbon fuels will play a critical role in the energy transition and in achieving carbon neutrality in all transport modes. Therefore, alongside electrification and hydrogen technology, low carbon fuels will remain essential beyond 2050, bringing important benefits to the European economy and society. Several technologies could potentially be deployed across Europe. But as I mentioned before, a clear and stable regulatory framework is key to provide the investment conditions that are needed for the deployment and development of these low carbon fuels. Taxation also can be an important tool to provide a strong market signals for the development of low carbon fuels. And talking of road transport, they are a crucial lead market for the timely development of scale-up of low carbon technology. This will allow us, the new fuels, to be available for the progressive decarbonization of aviation at a later stage. We are ready for the transition. The petrol refining industry and the distribution network of oil products have been operating in Europe for over 100 years. We have continuously evolved, adapting to market and regulatory demands while providing reliable and affordable energy, as well as many other products and services that are essential to society. We have the capabilities and we will do it. We have industrial assets to produce liquid fuels our industry is optimized to deliver its products in an efficient manner, which reduce the investment needed to deploy the new low-carbon fuels. And we also have the technical knowledge, and we operate with the highest safety and environmental standards. We have large experience in handling of hazardous substances like hydrogen. We have also the capabilities to push forward innovation based on our technical knowledge in new processes. And we also have the most important piece of the puzzle, very talented people with a huge commitment to pursue the ambition of climate neutrality for our activities and products. So we have the vision, we have the will, and we will transform ourselves, and doing so, we will contribute to transforming society. This is the way we see our future, and this is the way we are part of the solution. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, we thank you also, Oscar. You have given to us a very valuable inside picture within REPSOL. So I would like to ask you something. I know that there are some difficulties, existing difficulties, generally speaking, not for your company, in industry for the delivery of new products to the market. If this happens, tell us how you are going to accelerate, how you are going to solve this issue and to accelerate this delivery to the market.
Well, I think that there are many ways to resolve this problem. But first of all, we need awareness of the market. At this moment, for example, in Spain, in the year 2020, we have a biofuel mandate of 8.5 content in energy made from biofuel. And the market doesn't know about that. They are very aware of the electricity, but they are not aware of the possibilities that liquid biofuels, the green liquid, can provide. So the first is to be aware in the society. And the second is to work very hard in our industry, work with technologies, develop new pathways to introduce new materials, mainly waste and residues, into our processes, and deliver new kind of liquid fuels. And there is a third part that we must also work with the legislators. We have to provide a stable framework. We have to provide the capabilities to the companies to invest, to make long investment. We are investors as from the ground, but we need a stable framework just to do that. I think these are.
Okay, Oscar. Okay, Oscar, we thank you very much. We thank you very much. So let's move to our next speaker, the last speaker, Mrs. Johanna Atzmannstorfer. Johanna Atzmannstorfer is head of Bristol's Office International Governmental Relations of OMV. OMV, as everybody knows, is an excellent now energy company, not oil company. And we're looking forward from Johanna to listen to your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Wonderful. Okay, yes. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for the kind invitation. It's a great pleasure to join you today in this discussion and presentations. During this afternoon, you have already heard a lot of different aspects on the challenges of new technologies to decarbonize the road transport sector from my fellow panelists. And of course, the challenges are quite big, but as always, challenges always come with opportunities. For example, the opportunity to create something entirely new, the opportunity to change the perspective or reinvent something familiar, or to combine the old with something new. So with that in mind, I will use the next 10 minutes to provide you with a brief overview on some of OMV's most promising innovation projects intended to support and to take on the challenges that are waiting for us in the road transport sector. So the next slide. But before that, just a few words about OMV. OMV is one of Austria's largest listed industrial companies. We produce and market energy and high-end petrochemical solutions. In downstream, OMV operates 3 refineries in Europe with a total capacity of 17.8 million tons annual production. Our refineries in Europe are located in Romania, Germany, and Austria. The German and the Austrian refineries, Burghausen and Schwechat, are both also integrated into petrochemicals. So with that, let me jump to the first project that I would like to show you and that we are working on. So this first project, the so-called UPEI 2 project, is the first zero-emission hydrogen project in our refinery in Schwechat in Austria. For OMV, hydrogen has been playing an important role for many, many years now. So already in 2012, we opened the first hydrogen filling station in Austria, and OMV has been partner in several other hydrogen projects over the years. This UPEI 2 project now is, so to say, intended to step up the game, in particular for the refinery part. So the idea for the whole project, which is basically separated in 2 phases, is quite a unique combination of green hydrogen production on the one hand side and the construction of logistics and infrastructure for mobility purposes. In this project, we are currently focusing on the first phase, which is the planning of the 10 megawatt electrolyzers at the Schwechat refinery. As shown in the picture on the slide here, the plan is to use the full volume of the then produced hydrogen in the first phase as a substitute to the SMR hydrogen currently used. And by that, we would definitely reduce the CO2 footprint of the production on the one hand side, and also bring, of course, the green component to the fuels itself. The second part that is also shown here on the graph is still in the idea phase. So we are currently focusing very much on the electrolyzers for the time being. The second project that I wanted to show you is the so-called co-processing project. Co-processing per se is not as new as some other technologies that we heard about already, but we believe that it is a crucial contribution to increase the share of renewable liquid fuels in the market. The term co-processing means, in other words, non-technical words, working together. So basically, we use existing refining plants that are adjusted to process biogenic feedstock together with fossil-based raw materials. In contrast to blending, where in non-technical terms, final products are mixed together in the end, the bio and the fossil feedstock are treated together with the result of having a high-quality diesel already with a certain share of bio. The great advantage here is that we can use flexible and sustainable feedstocks, for example, rapeseed oil or used cooking oil. And this is one of the most important aspects, I believe. We have a direct replacement effect. In addition, and looking even beyond fuels, this technology might also be very promising with regard to greening petrochemical products. And speaking of petrochemical products, this already brings me to the next and last project that I want to share with you today. This is our so-called REOIL project. REOIL is a very innovative and OMV-made, we're very proud of that, process which converts used plastics into so-called synthetic crude. So the plastic feedstock that we use can be basically everything, which would otherwise end up in a waste incineration. A practical example would be the plastic cups that are collected on Austrian airline flights. The product from the REOIL process has a very low content of heavy components and can be used again as a feedstock in the refinery or in the refining processes. So we can produce fuels on the one hand side, and we can also use it as a feedstock for petrochemical products. Since 2018, we already have an on-site pilot plant in our Schwechat refinery. And my colleagues from the REOIL team are currently engineering and planning a demo plant, so to say a scale-up, with a capacity of already 2,000 kilogram per hours input capacity. So as you can see, we are very active in developing sustainable solutions to support the transition in the mobility sector and to help decarbonizing it. With these projects, we are, from a regulatory point of view, and the RED II was mentioned before already, covering basically all currently available low carbon fuel options. And this also perfectly reflects, I would say, our perspective regarding the future of mobility and transport. So it was mentioned before that there are different requirements for different transport modes, and low carbon liquid fuels are designed to perfectly meet the requirements of certain segments, we believe. By recognizing this also for road transport, we think that the transformation or the decarbonization even from the road transport sector might happen even faster. But in order to have more planning security, and I'm speaking now, of course, from a company perspective very much, and to realize the potential of low carbon or renewable fuels, a more holistic approach is needed from our perspective, and of course, a very or more stable framework to support the transition. Yeah, this was it from my side so far. Thank you very much for your attention, and happy to hear your questions.
Okay, we thank you, Johanna. We thank you very much about your presentation. I would like to ask you something a little bit general for OMV. How OMV sees the role of liquid fuels in the future? I would like to have something, a response from you about that.
We believe that liquid fuels will play a very important role, even also in the future. As I said, there are different modes of transport, and each different mode has different requirements. And it was mentioned before, for example, for short distances, battery electric vehicles are perfectly fine. But if we are talking about long distance or even heavy duty, we believe low carbon or even green liquid fuels will play a major role still in the future.
Okay, thank you again. Now we can discuss a little bit. If there are some questions from audience, I'm glad to see and to pass these questions to the speakers. But let me ask Cécile and Jorgo. Some energy experts remain skeptical that large-scale renewable hydrogen will ever be viable at a low cost. How do you respond? Cécile?
Yes, thank you very much for this question. Well, I'm not the hydrogen expert, so I'm sure Jorgo will add. But what I believe is, I mean, we've seen many studies, and we've seen studies that, on the contrary, confirm the potential of this technology. I don't have a magic ball, but what I can say is we have seen for other technologies, and I think renewable electricity generation is one good example. We have seen that for emerging technologies, it is hard to assess costs in the future because the progress can be done very quickly. We have seen for electricity generation, renewable electricity generation, the costs have been going down even beyond expectations. So I firmly believe that for emerging technologies, it is hard to assess what costs will be in the future, but what we know is that with technology improvement, with investment, with economies of scale, it can only go down And I believe that it may be actually faster than what we expect. So I'm quite optimistic about the prospects.
Okay, Jorgo?
Yeah, we have figures. We know that we can reach already a cost parity to fossil fuels in 28, 29. We have a clear pipeline of projects which is ready. We have seen the wonderful examples of REPSOL, where we see OMV, all members of Hydrogen Europe, very, very actively involved in the project pipeline that we will do under the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance. And we have a clear pathway. So as Cécile says, it's a question of scale. And you will see new giants in hydrogen production in the Iberian Peninsula. So Spain is one example. Portugal is the other example. I'm super impressed by the attempt of both governments to really become the superstars of the European hydrogen production. So you have another approach to the manufacturing of the technology that you need. But Spain, I'm super amazed. I say this clearly because there is room for potential in Greece. To say this clearly, there are two countries in Europe that have solar and wind. That's Portugal and that's Greece. So Spain is rather solar, and Greece is still, to be honest, could be faster. So I can see this clearly. The second thing I want to say is, what about the CO2 price? So if we now do our calculations with the conventional, let CO2 alone, no, we need to, in the European Green Deal spirit, of course, to give carbon a price. So fossil fuels will become more expensive. And so the cost parity will become even earlier a reality. For us, there is no doubt hydrogen has become systemic and real, and it's just a question of time. Last remark, the G20 summit, the last G20 summit hosted by Saudi Arabia, said clearly in the conclusions, stop fossil, let's go to synthetic fuels. So Saudi Arabia starts now a big campaign. They have a name for that, NEOM, that's a big region where they start this for replacing fossil by hydrogen-derived fuels. Fantastic. So we are not alone. Thank you.
Okay. So my next question to Johanna and Oscar, and it has to do with modifications of the existing infrastructure and the existing system. Do you think that we can afford the cost of this modification, that we need to use the existing infrastructure either in the refineries or in the distribution system? Johanna?
I mean, this is a very good question. Can we afford it? I mean, there is no question. I mean, I think I truly believe that we definitely need to use or should use the infrastructure that is there already, which would support, of course, the green transition. But of course, there need to be amendments done, and there will be, of course, huge investments there.
Okay, Oscar.
Yes, on top of that, in our company, always we think about that. Always we think about using our existing assets and how we could transform them to produce new kind of fuels or introduce new streams to produce energy. So definitely, yes, we could do it, and we have to find the way to do it economically.
Okay, Cécile, you know the transition creates new opportunities, but with long-term profitability horizons. And of course, we need, in order to proceed, very good investments to take place. So how this is going to be combined, how this is going to be faced? What do you think about the incentives that has to be given to the investors? The whole issue is not so easy, and the profits are not so easy and very early. So what do you think about that?
Well, obviously, I'm here to represent the independent fuel suppliers. So I will respond with that perspective, not touching upon the aspect related to investment into producing fuels, low carbon solutions. But when it comes to the distribution infrastructure, as I mentioned, we have in our membership, most of our members are actually investing into alternative fuels infrastructure. Some of these investments are significant. I'm talking about liquefied gas or hydrogen in particular, and currently they are not matched in terms of return on investment. Now, there is a commitment from our membership to embrace the climate neutrality objective, and there are some good prospects about the uptake of these technologies, and this is why investments are being made anyway. But what we would like to see, obviously, in order to improve the return on investment is to see incentives going to sustain the demand. What is not clear at the moment and what is not always consistent at national level and also across Europe is a commitment to develop the demand. So typically we would like to have incentives for consumers to switch to alternative fuel vehicles, and we would like to have a proper pricing system in order to make these alternatives viable. And we believe that with a stronger focus on the demand, we can really create a return on investment for infrastructure providers.
Okay, and my last question, because we don't have enough time, addressed to Oscar and Johanna, is has to do with the raw materials. Raw materials availability. Do you see any difficulties for this? Do you have, because I remember in your own presentation, Johanna, that you said that are going to collect a lot of raw materials. Do you think that this is an easy task?
Well, it depends very much on which raw materials. I mean, first generation sustainable raw materials are there. Where we see definitely an issue is when we are talking about advanced raw materials, which we are also, of course, looking at. But in terms of the volumes, this is going to be, from our perspective, still very challenging.
From our side, we are working very hard on that, and for us, it's the new upstream, the waste and residues. We call the waste stream internally, and we are working very hard to find a way to extract energy from municipal solid waste. There are a lot of waste that is not is going to the landfill, and we have to try to put more value on that. And there are also a lot of opportunities in the forestry and residues from the agriculture sector. I think those are the main fields where will be developed the technology.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, each one of you. Thank you indeed. And now we're ending our session, and we have to give the time for the next session to be ready. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.